A two-time winner in Monday Night Racing. It is our own professional odds maker, essentially trying to make it back to the playoffs here in season number 5. Matt Stallneck out here trying to win your way back in after a couple of wins already in Monday Night Racing. But you've been around the block a little bit in terms of what you do, props, bets, with NASCAR, with other groups. What exactly do you do in the racing industry?
So I worked in the racing industry for about 5 years, actually. I worked directly with NASCAR. I don't currently. I actually now work for a sports book. So I'm still in kind of the broader sports business world. But my time at NASCAR was split up between working on their marketing communications team, basically kind of helping manage the business narrative around the sport, kind of drive more positivity around the sport, positive news stories, particularly on the business. Like if we had really good wins, I would kind of help promote those sorts of things. Or if we were just doing something new on the business side of the sport, I was promoting it, whether that be a new partner, a new marketing campaign that we were rolling out. I would be the one kind of on the front lines promoting that. So I did that for my first about 3.5 years there. And then the last year or so that I was there, I actually moved into a pretty different role when I was at NASCAR, and I worked on our sports betting partnerships. And it was just one of those things where I always was interested in that side of the business. I've always just kind of had a passion for that world, and felt like I knew a lot about it, and was on some task forces internally when we didn't really have that many people working on the sports betting business. But as time had gone on and sports betting had legalized, we had like a full team established. So I was the second person that was hired for that team, or brought on for that team, managing all the partnerships that we had at the time, just kind of managing the strategy around it, what kind of NASCAR's broader play was going to be in sports betting. So I did that, and then like I said, just recently I started off with this new job with Tipico Sportsbook, and I'm one of their business development managers over there. So basically just helping grow the sports book and get Tipico into some new places, new states, help grow the business. So I've kind of moved from the PR side over to more like the revenue side of sports business, and I love it. So it's great. But I'm not a professional odds maker. I definitely want to make that part clear. As much as I love sports betting, but you don't probably want me setting any odds.
You know the ins and out more than anyone else, and in terms of going to sports betting in that world is completely different than when you look at other parts of other sports. Where did that passion for sports betting come from for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think for me, I have just always loved having a little bit more of an attachment to what's happening on screen. So like, I mean, I'm the first one to admit I am definitely a sports bettor. I have been ever since I was legally able to do so. So if I'm visiting family up in New York, I'll play, and I like playing free to play games here in North Carolina because we don't have legal sports betting down here. But I just like, whether it's like pools with friends and fantasy, I've just always loved kind of having that personal attachment to what's going on the screen. I was the kid in middle school and high school that was setting up fantasy leagues and things like that. I just always loved kind of having that personal attachment to whatever was going on. And I think the bigger part of what attracts me to the space, and what attracts me to kind of being, a casual sports bettor, fantasy player, DFS, all of that kind of stuff, is we all feel like we know something about the sports we watch, right? We're all consider ourselves experts, and it's an opportunity to kind of test your expertise, as long as you do it responsibly. So I've always enjoyed it from that perspective. Like, okay, like how much do I know about sport X? Like the NHL finals are on. I'm not necessarily like a mega hockey fan, but I know at least a thing or two. So I'm like, okay, like the Avs tonight, like, so that part of it is what makes it fun. And then there's the social element too. You're with a group of buddies. All of my close friends love sports, and we all like to bicker back and forth about what we think is going to happen. So sports betting and some of these, whether it's fantasy or whatever else, it's an opportunity to kind of test your mettle with your buddies too. So there's a lot of different reasons, but it's just fun, and it's good energy, and the space itself is exploding. So it's a really good place to be career wise.
So going from an avid partaker of fantasy leagues to now this is your job, how have you kind of evolved, or exactly how has your mentality around sports betting kind of changed or evolved in terms of just that particular industry?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, over time, I think, my personal relationship with, you know, what I would call kind of gamification, right? That can include sports betting, it can include free to play games, it can include fantasy, daily fantasy. Like when I first started off, I was like, I'm gonna make money. I'm gonna like go get rich off of all of my all of my knowledge. And then you learn over time, like maybe you break even or maybe you have some losses here and there, and you're like, okay, like why am I doing this to begin with? And for me, it's just a way to just make the adventure watching more fun. And that's kind of how my personal relationship with it has evolved. And like I view it like if I'm with some buddies and we want to throw a bet, if we're at like I'm from upstate New York, and if I'm home and we want to go bet on a Knicks game or something, if we're attending a Knicks game in New York City, it makes the event just like a little more fun to be there, and you have that personal attachment to it. But I look at it on the career side. It's just I know the ins and outs of this landscape really well, and because of that, I've always felt that careers are best kind of a fit for things that you just know really well. And I think if you can mesh what you know really well with what you're passionate about, and you can make money doing it, like that's the trifecta, right? And that's what led me to NASCAR. When I worked at NASCAR for all those years, I was and still am a diehard stock car racing fan. I can kind of exercise more of the fan side of myself now that I no longer am working full time there. But what led me to do that, and what also led me into this other opportunity is passion. I just I'm a pretty ADD individual. I don't think anybody that knows me would probably dispute that. So I am by far best served doing things that interest me and working in industries that interest me. And I think up to this point in my career, it's served me well, and I intend to continue following that path.
Where did that want to be a part of NASCAR start for you and it becoming your passion in motorsports?
Oh gosh, so I first started following the sport when I was probably about 4. Um, as silly as that sounds, if a 4-year-old can even really follow something, but my dad was working at Kellogg's cereal company at the time, when I was just like a little kid. And at the time, as you and probably most of the audience knows, Terry Labonte was the driver of the number 5 Kellogg's car. And he was going to races as part of the sponsorship that Kellogg's had at the time. And he'd come back, tell me these cool stories about these races that he was going to. Because he was, he worked on the sales side. He wasn't necessarily attached to motorsports, but at that time the sport was going gangbusters, and he was going to a lot of races. So he'd bring me home like Hot Wheels, and I'd already been, obsessed with Hot Wheels and cars when I was at that age. So that was kind of what sparked my interest. Then I started watching on TV, and then I found that I just had like a love for the sport. And as I got older, as we talk about sim racing, like I think the sim racing element's probably a huge reason I probably got amplified into the sport and really amped up my interest in it as I got older, because probably around the time I was 8 or 9, like some really realistic NASCAR video games started coming out, and I was just so beyond hooked at that point. I mean, like we're talking, I probably didn't miss a single race between the ages of 7 and 18. I really haven't missed too many since then. But I completely fell in love with it. I fell in love with the sport, and I grew up in the Northeast where NASCAR wasn't quite as popular. And for me, I think auto racing in general, because I wasn't just a fan of NASCAR, I would follow IndyCar, F1, a lot of other things. It was it was a sport that I could kind of call my own in a lot of ways, because a lot of other people weren't following those sports and didn't know much about it. And me being the contrarian that I can be sometimes, I think that was probably a part of the reason I got attached to it as well. So it's been a multi-decade love affair, and one that has only gotten more intense as I've gotten older and gotten closer to the sport too.
And what did it mean to you to have that passion and then go and work for NASCAR. Typically, that means a lot to someone who's been watching since they were 4 years old. So, what did that mean to be able to work for that company that you love their product?
It was an honor, and it remains that way. I still have so many friends and that work there, and everyone was when I kind of took this other opportunity to kind of do something else and grow my career in another way. Everyone was awesome. So it was so cool to see that I was able to take something that I was so passionate about and kind of be able to immerse myself in it for a pretty large chunk of my 20s, and then also grow my career as part of it. Like, I don't feel like all that many people are blessed to be able to work that closely to something that they love that much. And I think it just taught me so much about myself. And I think it also kind of helped me zero in on what it actually was tactically that I wanted to even do in my career. Because I think when I got started off, I knew I just wanted to work in sports, and NASCAR was like my favorite sport. I love the business of sports. I wanted to help grow the sports and the people in them that I cared about. And I didn't know at the time if I wanted to work with athletes or leagues, but NASCAR was always my North Star. And it really helped crystallize what it was that I wanted to do. I got to NASCAR and I thought when I got there that I wanted to be in PR. And then I did that, and that was great. And I got a lot of experience, met a lot of cool people, but realized I wanted to be closer to the revenue side of the business. And then I got to be closer to the revenue side of the business, working on the sports betting side. Then I found this love of sports betting. So it kind of just made a cascade that really helped guide my career. So I'll forever be grateful. And I always intend to stay close to the sport because it's given me so much.
And in terms to that career, from where you sit right now, where do you ultimately want to end up? Whether that's motorsports, whether that's sports betting, or somewhere else, where do you see yourself wanting to be from where you are right now?
It's funny. Like, I used to ask that question to myself all the time when I was 23, 24, and I was just kind of getting started. And whether it was before I had gotten to NASCAR or in the early days of kind of being there. And if you would have asked me that question 3 or 4 years ago, I've been like, oh yeah, I'm going to be at NASCAR my whole career and be in the motorsports industry. I would certainly never rule out a return. I have so many good friends there, and I've had a lot of great relationships that have maintained since I've left. But then I found this new love of sports betting that I wanted to explore for a while, and so it's so hard to say. I think the biggest thing that I've learned in my career is I just want to be doing something that I'm passionate about and leading and growing a business. I think that seems to be what charges me up. Whether I'm doing that, for a sports betting operator, which is what I'm doing now, or if I'm doing it for a race team or in another sport. I think as long as I'm still kind of in that sports, that broader sports world, sports and entertainment world, and I'm helping grow something that I'm really passionate about and believe in. That's really where I want to be. I just want to be more of a leader, work on my management skills, and prove that I can help grow businesses. And if I can say 10 years from now that I'm doing that in a role that I'm happy and something that I'm passionate about, that's all I kind of need.
So now let's move into some of the sim racing because you are a two-time winner. Where did you find iRacing, and how did you find Ford Martin and Monday Night Racing?
Yeah. So I found iRacing in 2011. So I had been pretty involved kind of on the console side of sim racing for a long time. You're going to hear my dog, by the way. He's barking up a storm because we have an actual storm out there. But I found I was really deep into like the EA Sports NASCAR games as a kid growing up, and also played things like NASCAR Racing 2003 season, NASCAR Heat, like a lot of these more sim racing oriented titles. And I, for me, like, sim racing was an outlet to explore the part of me that wanted to probably be a real race car driver. My family didn't know much about racing, even with my dad kind of being close to the sport and the sponsorship side. Like, there probably wasn't a lot of know-how to get me involved if I wanted to race at a young age. And it's a dangerous sport. And I think there were some concerns about that. So just didn't get those opportunities that I probably would have liked at a young age. And I went into some other sports and stuff at a young age. But I think late in my teens, I found sim racing as an outlet to compete and kind of explore that side of myself that wanted to see, like, what would it be like if I got out there and with a bunch of other drivers on the track and, got to test, my driving skills out. And sim racing's a safe way to do that. It's low cost, and you can get into it pretty easily. And then, I kind of expressed that through league racing and things like that on some of the console titles. I actually operated a couple NASCAR '08 and '09 leagues at one point, which are kind of funny to look back on now. So iRacing was just the natural step. Once I was able to kind of wrangle the money together to get my first kind of like gaming computer, it was off to the races at that point. I mean, I became fully obsessed, played it all throughout college, and got decent enough at the game to where, I was able, sorry, sim, to where I was able to, be fairly competitive. And then when I was working in NASCAR, I saw, that Monday Night Racing was kind of blowing up, and I did not know who Ford Martin was at that time. I had heard of the name because of his dad, but that was about it. And I knew he had worked at Fox. But other than that, I knew some people like DJ that had raced in this league, and it was during the kind of the pandemic, and no one had a lot of stuff to do. And I saw it as like a great way to network and meet people in the industry, and have fun. Like I had kind of gotten away from iRacing a little bit. I wasn't racing as much at that time, and wanted, an excuse of some kind to kind of wrangle my passion back for it. And it absolutely did. So I reached out to Ford because I just saw he was listed on the contact info page. And now here we are, helping run the thing. So it's kind of crazy. Started off just driving, and now we're growing something really special.
And then on top of that, just like that, one of the few multi-time winners in this league. And that's a pretty prestigious list also, some of those names that are on there. What has it meant to you to find virtual victory lane in some pretty chaotic fashions as well?
Yeah. So I played a lot of sports growing up, was all, played football, did karate, little league baseball, basketball, everything in between. So like I got to experience a lot of different moments in sports, high school football team went and played sectionals. And I would say none of those experiences compare, in my opinion, to competing in a Monday night racing event. Now, granted, we're talking about like youth sports, but still, like like being able to compete against real life drivers that you watch on Sundays, in many cases, drivers that I grew up watching, like Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Kyle Busch, who you admired, who were heroes growing up, like getting to race against them and treat them as peers. I mean, it's hard to even describe like what kind of awesome experience that is. So I'm just grateful. Like it's just grateful that I was in a position in my career where I happened to be in kind of the right place at the right time to get access to this league, and get to race. And as I've gotten older, and I'm approaching 30 now, you don't get a lot of opportunities to explore the competitive side of yourself. And anybody that knows me knows that I'm a ridiculously competitive person and always needing a competitive outlet in my life. And Monday Night Racing has been great because it combines that need and want I have to be driving and racing and have something like that, and I can do it in a hyper competitive environment with some of the most validated names in racing. So to me, that's as good as it gets. And then you throw being able to get a couple wins on top of it. It's icing on the cake. But simply just being able to race against some of the best, not just in sim racing but in real racing, makes it pretty special.
And last one for you here, and this is kind of away from the sim, away from the racetrack, maybe even away from your career. What makes you you? Who is Matt Stolnick?
Wow, what a broad question. Who is Matt Stolnick? I would say, look, I'm definitely a very competitive person at heart. I think I put a lot of myself into just kind of being being and doing the best at everything that I can do, whether that be, in my career. My career is ridiculously important to me, and wanting to just show up every day and do great and help grow businesses and push that side of my life forward is a huge part of it. And obviously you want to do great as a friend and a family member. So whether that be the people I care about close to me, just spending time with them, whether that be my girlfriend in Duval, family members I have here in Charlotte, family members back home in Syracuse, whether it be my mom or, my dad, my brother, close friends, and just somebody that just likes enjoying his time with the people close to him, I would say is a huge part of who I am. Um, and then beyond that, I'm a huge hobbyist. Like, I think the sim racing side of it is certainly an outgrowth of just my love of hobbies. Like I'm sitting in like my man cave right now, and I got some fun chairs and whatnot set up. I got my Xbox and TV set up over here because I like playing first person shooters and whatnot. So relaxing with that, playing golf on the weekends with friends, and I'm always just looking at ways to stay active and just it always kind of comes back to competitive outlets for me, for better or worse. I would say those are probably the biggest things that drive me.
Well, Matt, we've seen you being driven by that competitive nature a number of times in Monday Night Race, and looking forward to seeing you the rest of the regular season to try to make your way into the playoffs.
Awesome.